Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating historical dive into how our habits around cleaning, health, and home maintenance have completely transformed since the 1960s. We're going to look closely at an era where everyday, practical knowledge was quietly swapped out for highly specialized consumer goods. And we'll rediscover some incredibly effective, beautifully simple practices from the past that are totally backed up by modern science. So just picture a typical modern American home for a second. You probably have a cabinet completely packed with specialized color-coded bottles, right? You've got a specific spray for the bathroom glass, a different wipe for the kitchen counters, specialized deodorizers for the fridge, and who knows how many little tubes crammed into the medicine cabinet. Now compare that totally cluttered picture with an Amish farmhouse, which actually perfectly mirrors how most early 20th century American homes operated. They basically relied on just one small 3% brown bottle of hydrogen peroxide for all of it. A single $3 bottle tackling the exact same jobs that today require what? 40 or more specialty products? Seeing that massive contrast really sets the stage. So here's our roadmap for today to unpack how this 60-year shift happened. We'll start with the 1960s consumer shift, then look at historical first aid practices, move into maintaining mid-century homes, and finally, we'll uncover this really incredible 1965 produce secret. All right, let's jump right into part one, the 1960s consumer shift and the dawn of the era of specialization. To really understand this, we have to look at the timeline. Back in the 1920s, you had these small-town Midwestern doctors relying heavily on 3% peroxide as their go-to first-line cleaner for farmers who came in with nasty machinery or barbed wire cuts. Then you hit the 1940s. Wartime rationing kicks in, and American households are forced to stretch a single, multi-use product as far as it could possibly go. But then, look at what happens between 1960 and 1975. The household chemical market in the U.S. just absolutely explodes, expanding by over 400%. And this wasn't just natural population growth either. It was a very deliberate push away from those frugal, single-bottle habits of the past towards a brand new, highly specialized product model. So how exactly did they pull this massive shift off? Well, the marketing tactics completely changed. Suddenly, ads in hugely popular magazines like Good Housekeeping were slapping labels like dangerous and old-fashioned onto those traditional multi-use products. They actively framed traditional cleaning as unsanitary, and instead they rolled out these bright, color-coded bottles, blue specifically for the bathroom, yellow only for the kitchen. They literally invented entirely new product categories out of thin air, stuff like grout whiteners and fridge deodorizers. The underlying message was pretty heavy-handed. If you actually cared about your family's health, you needed to ditch the old brown bottle and buy these new chemicals. Meanwhile, the Amish, who obviously weren't tuning into TV commercials or reading glossy magazines, completely missed this messaging blitz and just kept right on using their historical practices. And the financial impact of this historical shift is absolutely wild. Today, an average American household drops between $400 and $600 a year on all these specialized cleaning and hygiene products. If you stretch that out over 30 years of homeownership, you're looking at spending up to $18,000. 18 grand, all on products that, historically, were handled by one multi-use $3 bottle. Let's move on to our second section, historical first aid practices and the chemistry hiding in your medicine cabinet. What's genuinely fascinating about these older medical practices is the objective science behind them. You know when you pour 3% peroxide on a scrape and it starts to bubble and foam? That's not magic, and it's not actually burning you. It's just pure chemistry. Our own white blood cells actually produce hydrogen peroxide to fight off infection. So when you apply it to a cut, it reacts with an enzyme called catalase that lives inside damaged tissue. This reaction instantly releases oxygen gas, which creates a sort of mechanical cleaning action. It literally bubbles up and physically lifts dirt, dead cells, and bacteria right out of the wound. Knowing that, it makes total sense how Amish families pass down their wound care steps. It's incredibly specific. First, you rinse the fresh scrape with just plain water to wash away the loose dirt. Second, you pour a little bit of 3% peroxide directly on the wound. But here's the kicker. You only do this for the first cleaning to foam out the deep debris. Step 3 is crucial. You stop using the peroxide. You switch entirely over to clean water and honey to help it heal. The whole philosophy back then was to apply the right product exactly once to clean it out mechanically, and then just step back and let the body do what it does best and heal itself. That is a massive contrast to how we constantly slather on specialty ointments day after day now. And that little brown bottle handled way more than just scrape knees. It practically replaced an entire modern pharmacy aisle. Historically, people would dilute it half and half with water and use it as a daily mouthwash to knock out gingivitis. Want whiter teeth? Decades before we had those expensive specialized whitening strips, people just mixed it with baking soda to make a paste, which, by the way, is completely supported by peer-reviewed dental journals today. Got nail fungus? Well, basic microbiology tells us fungus is anaerobic. It hates oxygen. So soaking your feet in warm water with a generous pour of peroxide creates a high-oxygen environment that kills it off. Even for stubborn earwax, just tilting a few drops into the ear for a minute safely softens the buildup. All right, let's head into Section 3, maintaining mid-century homes, specifically those built between 1950 and 1975. If you live in a house built in that mid-century window, you're surrounded by very specific architectural materials. We're talking highly porous cement-based grout and galvanized iron plumbing. The issue is, those shiny new specialty products you grab at the hardware store today, they were formulated for houses built in the 2000s, not the 1960s. So when you apply modern chemicals to these older materials, it usually just leads to constant frustration and, worse, actual damage. Let's look at bathroom mold as the perfect example. Modern standard bleach is great at killing surface mold, sure, but it completely fails to penetrate the porous cement grout they used heavily up until the late 70s. So the mold's roots survive, and it just keeps coming back. The historical fix for this is brilliantly simple. Just pour 3% peroxide straight into a spray bottle, soak those grout lines, and walk away for 10 minutes. Because of how it's formulated, it actually seeps into the porous cement and foams up wherever there's active mold. Come back, give it a quick scrub with an old toothbrush, rinse with warm water, and boom, you've completely destroyed the roots. This really highlights why understanding the chemistry of an older home is so absolutely crucial. Think about it. If you take modern bleach to the older rubber gaskets on a pre-1980s fridge, that bleach is going to dry out and crack the rubber, totally ruining the seal. Or if you dump bleach into a washing machine connected to old galvanized iron pipes, it chemically reacts with trace iron in the water and will literally turn your bright white clothes a dingy yellow or gray. But the historical peroxide method, it lifts bacteria right off without drying out those rubber gaskets, and it brightens up your laundry and cast iron pipes without yellowing your clothes. It's just a smarter match for the materials. Finally, let's step into the garden and the kitchen for Section 4, the 1965 produce secret. Back in the early 1960s, agricultural researchers at big land-grant universities like Cornell and Ohio State started doing some digging. And they actually validated what Amish farmers had already been doing in ceramic crocks for generations. The researchers proved that soaking seeds in a dilute peroxide solution softened the seed coatings and genuinely sped up germination by 2 to 3 days. Not only that, but using a dilute spray directly on plants oxygenated the roots and knocked out powdery mildew. And bringing it all the way to modern, peer-reviewed science, we now know these exact same solutions significantly drop the levels of E. coli and Salmonella sitting right on the surface of our produce. But the biggest bombshell dropped in 1965. The USDA quietly published this small agricultural bulletin detailing a process they called hydrogen peroxide cold immersion. This wasn't some new lab invention. It was a non-refrigerated technique that Pennsylvania Dutch farmers had been using since at least the 1920s to massively extend the shelf life of their harvest. The farmers lovingly called it the vitality rinse, and you won't believe how simple it is. You just fill up a big basin with cold water. Next, you pour in roughly a quarter cup of 3% hydrogen peroxide for every gallon of water. Drop your veggies in, your leafy greens, your strawberries, cucumbers, and let them hang out for 5 to 10 minutes. Take them out, let them drain on a clean cloth, and store them somewhere cool. What's happening here is you're stripping away the surface mold spores and bacteria that cause that fast outside-in rotting. So instead, the vegetables just decay at their own, much slower natural internal pace. When you look at the actual historical data from these studies, the results are staggering. Look at this. Untreated strawberries that would normally grow that gross fuzzy mold in 4 days, they lasted 12 days after the wash. Lettuce went from wilting and sad in a week to staying crisp for 3 whole weeks. Tomatoes stayed firm on the counter for nearly a month. And cucumbers, which normally turn into mush after 10 days, stayed crisp for 3 weeks. This is measurable, undeniable proof of just how powerful this pre-1960s habit really was at preserving food, way before vacuum sealers or fancy fridge tech. So what does this actually mean for us today? Well, it translates to an average savings of about $360 a year per household. That is $30 a month of fresh food you've already paid for, saved from being tossed straight into the trash can, all by using a few pennies worth of a product that's probably sitting in your medicine cabinet right now. Which really brings us to the core theme of this entire historical analysis. As the source material so perfectly puts it, you recovered a way of running a home, a kitchen, a garden, and a medicine cabinet that used to belong to every American family and was slowly replaced product by product until you forgot you ever had it.
This knowledge was never outlawed, it was never banned, it just got buried under decades and decades of specialized marketing.
So I'll leave you with this final thought today. Out of all the awesome pre-1960s household habits we've dug into, whether it's the simpler first aid philosophy, the mid-century home maintenance hack, or that absolutely game-changing 1965 Vitality rinse, which one are you going to reintegrate into your home first? Think about it and keep seeking out this kind of practical history that makes life just a little bit simpler. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.